TPP is going to change the way that utility sector procures, but not in a way that's directly driven out of the requirements for private utilities companies. I'm with Paddy Buchanan today from Efficio's utilities practice. Tell me, Paddy, was that an accurate statement or is there more to it?
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me on. I think on this one, it's really a politician's answer. It's a yes and a no. So fundamentally, if you're a private utility, things are not going to change a huge amount due to the number of exemptions, and therefore your change process is largely going to be about adopting new procurement routes and updating terminology. So, for example, like under the utilities contracts regulations, private utilities won't need to publish pipeline notices, preliminary market engagement notices, KPIs for contracts over 5 million, contract details notice, and various others. But there are a few changes for these utilities to get their heads around, such as increased requirement to identify and manage conflicts of interest, duty to justify the lotting structure used, move from qualification systems under UCR to utilities dynamic markets, and others which have been discussed on previous episodes in the series. But here's where the no comes. From a private utility perspective, there are far more fundamental changes. The exemptions I just mentioned for private utilities largely don't apply to publicly funded utilities. These will see a far greater change and more of a move closer to the broader public sector in their application of the new Act. So this then creates a two-tier utilities legal system where suppliers and utilities will have to act very differently depending on whether they're publicly or privately funded.
Okay, so it's a two-tier system then. Can you explain to me what that's going to mean for players within the market?
Yeah, so I think it's fundamentally going to change the way that suppliers in the market behave. So with the shift of public utilities closer to the broader public sector legislation, we're likely to see those supplier behaviours making that same shift. Under the UCR regs, market challenges or the threat of those are a relatively rare occurrence. But under the new Act, we can see the potential for suppliers to increase their activity in this space and expect bid managers to sharpen their pencils on here and be more challenging and prone to questioning outcomes. Equally, the two-tier nature of utilities within the Act could confuse some suppliers. So that could then lead to a trickle-down effect where that increased litigious behaviour that we're seeing for public utilities starts to creep into private utilities suppliers.
Wow. Okay. So I'm a CPO of a major utility. Tell me what I'm concerned about then.
So I think again, this is very different depending on whether you're public or private. So a lot of this will come down to cultural and behavioural change rather than the technical changes. So in the case of public utilities, your risk profile will change significantly under the new Act. And as mentioned before, we'd like to see much more litigious behaviour amongst the supply base. So you'll have to make sure that your teams adapt their behaviours to remain commercially minded, but having more of a focus on being squeaky clean and acting according to the regs. But then in the case of private utilities, it's much more about understanding the exemptions you have so that you're prepared for that increased level of challenging behaviour as suppliers grapple with the different application of the Act.
Wow. Okay. So I think that is really interesting, and it does depart from the sort of from the narrative and the sentiment that you hear when you speak to utilities buyers. As my operation generally sits in central gov, and you wouldn't believe the amount of disruptive challenge that incumbent suppliers can make. So if the market even shifts a small direction in that way, then there's a lot to focus on in terms of preparatory tasks. I hope everyone's enjoyed today's microcast. Please comment. Please comment in the box below, and we look forward to seeing you next week.